So this video is about private landlords. In order to understand what a private landlord is, it can be looked at from two perspectives. Now, to a lot of people, it's only looked at from one perspective, but the problem is that people don't understand that there's a perspective that they're missing, and the perspective that they're missing is the most important perspective. Now, in order to understand a private landlord, you have to understand what the term private means. Now, if you are a U.S. citizen, then public means it's used in connection with a corporation, and private means not connected to a corporation. So that's inside the United States because a U.S. citizen is inside the corporate United States. Now, outside the United States, private means outside of the corporate United States, and public means inside the corporate United States. So, for the private landlords that are inside the corporate United States, which means you're a citizen, whether you have an LLC attached to your apartment complex, doesn't matter for real. If you are a private landlord inside the United States, you are only private from the perspective of the corporate United States. Outside the United States, which is the Republic United States, you're considered a public landlord. So when I was speaking on perspectives, from a U.S. citizen perspective, if it's an apartment complex, it's a public landlord. And if it's just a person doing it, using a house, whatever, it's a private landlord. Outside the United States, as a representative of your name, the apartment complex is considered public, and the private landlord is considered a public landlord. Now, the reason why I said that the apartment complex is a public landlord and the private landlord is a public landlord is because both landlords cannot do a self-help eviction. It's illegal for a private landlord inside the United States and a public landlord to do a self-help eviction, which means you had to go through the courts. If you have to go through the courts to evict somebody, you're not private. When I say that you're not private, it ties back to the car situation. Now, if my car is private because it's not titled, if my car was titled, it would be considered private property because I'm not using my car. All right, let's say I titled my car, but I'm not using my car to do like Lyft or Uber or anything. Then that would be considered public. So if I use my car to do Uber and Lyft, it's considered public. But if I just have a car and I don't use it to do Uber or Lyft or anything like that, it's considered private. Now, that's from the perspective of a U.S. citizen. But a perspective from the representative sees that if you title that car, it doesn't matter whether you use that car for a corporation or not. It's considered public. Just having a bill of sale is considered private because it's private from the United States government. A private landlord inside the United States is not private from the United States government. If you don't believe me, look it up. Can a private landlord or an apartment complex do a self-help eviction legally? And the answer is no. So I'll give you an example of a private landlord. I'm a private landlord. That spot on Woodburn, I'm renting out the rooms. I can do a self-help eviction. It's not illegal for me to do a self-help eviction. But for a private landlord inside the United States and a public landlord is inside the United States, which is an apartment complex, it's illegal to do a self-help eviction. So, as a private landlord inside the United States, you have rights and privileges as a tenant. As a tenant, I could use my accepted for value stamp or I could use Federal Reserve notes to pay rent. Now, I understand that private landlords use that rent money as income. I understand that. The problem with that is that unless you're ready not declare that income to the IRS, it's still considered income within the United States. If it's considered income within the United States, then it's taxable. So your rent is considered a tax. Now, if you got an apartment complex, the rent comes from the social security number of the tenant. Now, all right, I'll give you an example. The tenant here, they get a bill for the rent. The leasing office went into the tenant's social security number, billed them for the amount that they agreed to the rent, sent that to the tenant, and then asked that tenant to pay that amount. The reason why the leasing office asked that tenant to pay that amount is because the leasing office is considered a withholding agent. By the leasing office being considered a withholding agent, when that tenant pays that rent goes into an account that is separated for the tenant that is attached to the IRS. So if you get a claim like a failure to pay a rent, the apartment complex got paid. As long as they had your social security number, they got paid. If you didn't have a social security number, you was not getting in this apartment. So the social security number pays the rent as far as the apartment complex is concerned. But now the apartment complex has a duty to ask the tenant for rent because they don't want to say, as a U.S. citizen, it's considered rent. That's public. But privately, which is outside the United States, rent is a tax. So like I said, the tax is either a gift or a loan. As a U.S. citizen, it's only considered a gift because you're not allowed to request your rent back. But as a representative, which is outside the United States, you can request that rent back. Because once you request it back, it's considered a loan. So any rent that gets paid, if you don't request it back, then it's a loan. And the only way you can request it back is to be a representative of your name. So for the private landlords, because I've been seeing like articles talking about, oh, the eviction moratorium is illegal. Y'all have to realize that as a U.S. citizen, anything under the United States code and your state code is legal as long as it doesn't violate the Constitution. Now, like I said, the United States knows how to finesse all through these constitutional loopholes to do whatever they want. But at the end of the day, if you realize for a private landlord that the government protects the tenants, but it's not protecting y'all. So when I was riding around with no tags, the government didn't protect me. The government worked against me. Even though you're a U.S. citizen, the government is working against you because it doesn't protect the landlords the same way it protects the tenants. Because by the United States being the real landlord, they determine who they're going to protect. So the United States can protect the tenant, but they might not protect the landlord in the same way. Now, I understand that, they're going through the legal battle to open it back up, but a private landlord is a U.S. citizen. A public landlord is a U.S. citizen. I am a private landlord. I am not a U.S. citizen. So if you're a U.S. citizen and you're a private landlord, you're not private. You're only private inside the United States. Outside the United States, you're considered a public landlord. There is no way that it's illegal for you to do a self-help eviction and you're private and you're not outside the United States. Or you're not, basically something like that. You know what I'm trying to say. I be high for real. But anyway, if you can't do a self-help eviction, you're a U.S. citizen. I could do a self-help eviction because I'm not a U.S. citizen. So when people talk about, oh, you scamming the landlord, if you respect Federal Reserve notes, then the presumption is that you're a U.S. citizen. Like, I want Federal Reserve notes. But guess what? My rent is not considered a tax because I'm a non-taxpayer. My name is a taxpayer, but I'm a non-taxpayer. So any rent I get, that's tax-free. So it's really rent for me. But for y'all, for private landlords, y'all collecting a tax, even if it's considered income. If you gotta declare the income, it's a tax. And I understand that people make their income and they trying to provide for their families for real. But I mean, as a U.S. citizen, you're a slave, but you agreed to be a slave. Until you decide not to be a slave anymore, you're going to be a slave. So the United States courts is not going to protect you if they decide they don't want to protect you. The United States courts protect me because I'm protected by the Constitution. A U.S. citizen has to go through the U.S. code and the state code to even get through the Constitution. And if they're trying to say a statute violates the Constitution, good luck with that one. I'm not governed by any statutes. I'm not governed by any codes. The Constitution governs the government. I just don't have to do any personal property damage. I'm chilling. So, not to get too much off topic, like I said, private landlord, inside the United States, private is public outside the United States. So if you say you're a private landlord and you're a U.S. citizen, from the perspective of a representative of a U.S. citizen, you're a public landlord. An apartment complex is a public landlord. If you're inside the United States, nothing inside the United States is private. If the United States telling you it's public, that's because they own it. If the United States tells you that it's private, they own it. Nobody can prove me wrong. Nobody at all. So, like I said, if you want to be a private landlord and a U.S. citizen, a private landlord as a U.S. citizen is like a mom and pop store. Like, you're a little bank. The United States is the big bank. Now, ain't it funny that a private landlord has to go through the same eviction procedure as an apartment complex? Apartment complex got all that money. A private landlord only got what he got in his pocket. Like, apartment complex is Jay-Z and a private landlord is Dame Dash. They both got to go through the same procedure to do an eviction. But who got more money? Apartment complex is big bank and Dame Dash is little bank. I'm not saying him personally is little bank, but just as an example. So if you're a private landlord as a U.S. citizen, you a little bank. And considering that the landlords are fighting the moratorium by the CDC, it's proof that y'all a little bank. I'm not saying this to be rude or disrespectful, but the truth is the truth. If you're going to be a real private landlord, you're not going to be a private landlord as a U.S. citizen. So, once you rent a spot out, you give up possession. As by me, I'm a real private landlord. I could take back possession and don't have to go through the courts. I could straight self-help of it and take possession back easily. Now, ain't you think it's funny? Now, mind you, this spot that I'm doing the warrant of restitution for, that's the spot I'm renting out. Now, isn't it funny that they can't put out a tenant even with a warrant of restitution because I keep stamping them, yet I can rent this spot out and get paid, and none of it's a tax, and the IRS can't do nothing about it, and you can send this to every government agency and they can't do nothing about it? A private landlord can't do that. At least a private landlord that's a U.S. citizen. They can't do that. I can't know. So, life is all about choices. I'm trying to expose that there are choices that you can make. You might not know about them choices, but once you know about the choices, you got to make a choice. If you want to be a private landlord as a U.S. citizen, be my guest. But like I said, you're a little bank. I'm a big bank, and the United States government is a big bank. So, don't let the United States fool you into thinking that you're somebody because you're a private landlord. You're not. Me, I don't have no ill will toward private landlords. I want a private landlord to be a real private landlord, because a private landlord inside the United States is considered a public landlord, and a public landlord inside the United States is considered a public landlord. And the public landlord is little big bank, and the private landlord is little bank. I'm a private landlord, but I'm a big bank because I could beat the United States government and the private landlord. So, like I said, look it up and prove me wrong. Don't let ego and pride put you in a stupor, you feel me? Because at the end of the day, if you can't prove what I'm saying wrong, that means what I'm saying is right. And I know what I'm saying is right. So, unless you can't prove me wrong, all the private landlords that are U.S. citizens, y'all might want to reconsider how y'all carry it as a private landlord inside the United States. Because me, a private landlord, a United States citizen is foreign to me. So a private landlord is just considered a public landlord. So if you call yourself a private landlord, you're a U.S. citizen. To me, you're a public landlord. You gotta go through the same thing the courts gotta go through. So like I said, if a self-help eviction is illegal and you're a private landlord, you're a low bank. So you might want to look into it and fix it.